She poured a full can of paint on me, in front of everyone, just because I was black, just because she never liked me from day one, and her husband, he was standing right there, watching, silent. She thought he'd say nothing. But what he did next shocked the entire room. I never imagined that working as a maid in a billionaire's house would teach me the biggest lesson of my life. I grew up poor, the kind of poor where you count coins before grocery shopping. My mother worked two jobs and still couldn't pay the light bill on time. So when I got the chance to work in one of the richest houses in the city, I didn't think twice. I packed my one suitcase and said goodbye to my small apartment. I stepped into a world I never thought I'd be part of. The house was massive, with marble floors and chandeliers bigger than my old bedroom. I remember standing at the gate that first day, just staring up at it like it was a dream. The man who owned it was calm and respectful, surprisingly humble for someone with that much money. He always said thank you when I brought him coffee. He always asked how my day was going, even when he was clearly busy. In a house full of cold marble and colder people, he was the only warmth I felt, but his wife was a completely different story. From the very first day I felt it, that look she gave me, not curiosity, just pure dislike. I hadn't done anything wrong, hadn't even said more than good morning, ma'am, to her. Maybe it was jealousy. Maybe it was insecurity. Maybe some people just need someone to look down on to feel powerful. Whatever it was, she made sure I knew my place in that house. She reminded me of it every single day, in small, cruel ways that added up over time. She would call me for the smallest things, refold towels that were already perfect, rearrange flowers that didn't need it. If I moved a fraction slower than she wanted, she'd snap at me in front of other staff. One time I used the wrong hand soap in a guest bathroom and she lectured me for 10 minutes straight. I never fought back. I never raised my voice. I just did my job, kept my head down, and told myself this was temporary. I had bills to pay and a family depending on me. I couldn't afford to lose this job over pride, so I swallowed every insult and told myself it would get better. It didn't get better. Then came the night of the party. It wasn't just any gathering, it was one of the biggest events the house had ever hosted. Business partners, socialites, even reporters were invited, and the entire staff had been preparing for nearly 2 weeks straight. Every chandelier was polished until it glowed. Every flower arrangement was flown in fresh that morning. The kitchen worked around the clock preparing for the evening. This party mattered to the family. It was about image, about status, about showing the world exactly how much they had. I was assigned extra duties that night on top of my normal work. I was told to help serve drinks, assist in the kitchen, and keep the guest areas spotless all evening. It was exhausting, but I didn't complain. I moved from room to room, smiling politely, refilling glasses, doing everything I could. Everything was fine until she found her reason. I still don't fully understand what set her off that night. Maybe it was the stress of hosting, maybe the wine she'd had earlier. Maybe she simply needed someone to blame, and I happened to be standing there in that moment. She accused me of ruining a table setting I hadn't even touched all evening. I tried to explain calmly that I hadn't been near that table at all. But she wasn't interested in truth. She wanted a moment, an audience, and unfortunately for me, she had both right there in front of her. Guests slowly turned to watch as her voice rose higher. I felt my chest tighten, that familiar heat crawling up my neck. It's the feeling you get when you know something bad is coming and there's nothing you can do to stop it from happening to you. She kept going, louder and angrier with every sentence. Then she reached for something nearby, a can of paint left over from earlier decorations. Before I could process what was happening, she poured it over me, right there in front of every single guest in that room. The room went completely silent for a moment. Then came the whispers, a few gasps, and worst of all, laughter. Not everyone laughed, but enough did. Enough to burn that moment into my memory forever. I stood there with paint dripping down my uniform, pooling at my feet. I felt smaller than I had ever felt in my life. Not because of the paint itself, but because of what it represented: years of being overlooked, disrespected, treated like I didn't matter. All of it condensed into one humiliating moment in front of complete strangers who didn't even know my name. I didn't cry, not there. I refused to give her that satisfaction. I just stood frozen, staring at the floor, wondering how I would walk out of that room with whatever dignity I had left. And then, in the corner of my eye, I saw him. He had been standing near the entrance, and he had seen everything, every second of it happen right in front of him. His expression wasn't amusement or indifference, it was something else entirely. Shock, disbelief. A kind of anger I had never once seen on his face before that night. For a moment, I thought he would stay quiet like always, like every other time his wife had been unkind and he simply looked away. I braced myself to walk out humiliated and alone. But then he moved and the entire room seemed to shift with him. He walked straight toward his wife, past the guests, past the shocked faces, and stopped right in front of her. His voice, when it came, wasn't loud, but it cut through that silent room like a blade. Everyone heard him clearly. Every single person felt the weight of his words. Apologize to her, now. His wife blinked, confused, like she thought she'd misheard him. She let out a nervous laugh, glancing around at the guests, trying to turn it into a joke. But nobody was laughing anymore. The humor had drained completely out of the room the second he spoke those words. I'm not joking, he said, his voice steady, cold, final. You will apologize to her right now in front of everyone here, or you can explain to our guests why you won't. His wife's face went pale. She looked at him, then at me, then back at him, searching for an escape that didn't exist. She tried to argue, tried to twist the story, claiming I had provoked her somehow. But he didn't budge an inch. He simply repeated himself, calmer this time, which somehow made it even more terrifying. I saw everything. Don't make this worse for yourself by lying to me too. The silence stretched so long I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Guests stood frozen, drinks in hand, watching a marriage crack open in real time. Finally, her shoulders dropped. She turned to face me, humiliation written all over her face for the first time that night. I'm sorry, she said, barely above a whisper, the words clearly costing her more than anything she'd ever paid for in her life. It wasn't warm, it wasn't kind, but it was real, forced out of her in front of the very people she'd tried to impress all evening. I nodded, unable to find words of my own in that moment. Part of me wanted to feel triumphant, but mostly I just felt exhausted, embarrassed, and strangely numb, standing there covered in paint while dozens of eyes watched me process what had just happened. He turned to me then, his expression softening completely. Go clean up, take the rest of the night off. We'll talk tomorrow, he said gently, like he was speaking to someone who mattered, someone worth protecting for the very first time since I'd started working there. I walked out of that room with paint still dripping down my arms, but somehow I stood taller than I had in months. The other staff members watched me go, some with sympathy, some with something else entirely, a quiet respect I hadn't earned through work but through survival. That night I lay awake for hours, replaying everything. Part of me wanted to quit first thing in the morning, to walk away from that house and never look back. Another part of me was curious what tomorrow would actually bring, what we'll talk really meant coming from him. The next morning he found me before I even started my shift. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept much either. He apologized again, more personally this time, telling me he was ashamed it took so long for him to say something out loud. He told me he'd noticed his wife's behavior toward staff for years but had always made excuses for her, telling himself it wasn't his place to interfere, that it wasn't that serious. Watching it happen with his own eyes in front of an entire room had finally broken something in him. He offered me a choice. I could leave with full severance and a strong reference, no hard feelings, or I could stay in a new role entirely, one with more respect, better pay, and direct oversight from him instead of his wife. He said the choice was completely mine to make. I sat with that decision for a long moment, thinking about everything I'd endured just to keep this job. Part of me wanted to walk away and never think about that house again, but another part of me wanted to see what staying might actually look like now. I chose to stay, but on my own terms this time. I told him I needed things to actually change, not just for one night, but permanently, consistently, in ways I could count on going forward. He agreed without hesitation, and for once I believed someone meant it. In the weeks that followed, things did change. His wife kept her distance, cold but careful now, aware that her actions had consequences that could reach her marriage. Other staff members started speaking up too, sharing their own stories once they saw that someone had finally listened. I learned something that year I'll never forget. Money and power can make people feel untouchable, like they can treat others however they please without consequence. But dignity isn't something that can be poured away with a can of paint, no matter how humiliating the moment feels. Sometimes justice doesn't come from fighting back loudly. Sometimes it comes quietly, from someone finally choosing to see what they'd been ignoring all along. That night in front of strangers, I learned that silence isn't always weakness, and staying isn't always surrender. If you've ever felt invisible, disrespected, or made to feel small by someone who thought they were above you, I hope this story reminds you that your dignity is yours alone. Nobody, no matter how much power they hold, has the right to take that away from you. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button right now. Subscribe if you believe cruelty always finds its way back to those who spread it. Comment below, have you ever been disrespected by someone in power? Share your story with me. Turn on notifications because the next story might shock you even more. See you next time.